Namaskar and welcome to episode number 24 of the Indologia Podcast. We are often told that today the world is a very small place. The world is a global village where most of us are pretty much like each other, that the project called Globalization has succeeded. And it seems believable as well when you look around yourself. The McDonald's are all over the place. No matter which country you go to, there is a KFC, there is a Taco Bell. You have the same brands everywhere. You have the same movies from Hollywood being shown everywhere. The same music being played in clubs from Bombay to Berlin. So does this mean that we are the same people now? If you look at the West, it certainly seems so. The Western people or the white Christian community could interchangeably be swapped. An Australian could just fit into American society without any problems. A British man could just walk into Germany and shouldn't have many problems integrating. Many Asian cultures as well have worked very hard at integrating with the Western style. Look at Japan, for instance. They even play baseball. South Korea is a fantastic example. Their music is a cheap replica of Western pop, boy band, girl band music. Their movies, slightly better, still are heavily influenced by Hollywood. They have even given up their old pagan religions, with Christianity being the flavor among the religious people. And more than 50% people considering themselves atheists, which is also very fashionable in the West. But what about us, the Indians? Are we also compatible with everything? Can we also fit in anywhere we go? Technically, we do. Indians are present in every country in the world, and in all of those countries, they are among the most prosperous communities. So does this mean that we're also compatible? We're also like them? Are all of us like each other then? Well, for us, that's not quite true. Because the Hindu phobia in the West is a good sign of how they do not consider us one of them. The Hindu phobia that Hindus face anywhere in the world is a good sign of that. What is it that makes us so different from them? Is it the food? Is it the dancing and the singing and the clothing? None of those things actually, because those are just superficial things. These differences exist between any countries today. But the difference is much, much deeper than that. The difference is at a root level thought. And that is what we are going to discuss today. And to help form my argument, I'll be reading you some pieces from a wonderful book called On Hinduism, which was written by Sri Ram Swarup, who we all know as a fantastic Indic thought leader, a wonderful writer. But what not many people know is that he was also an amazing writer on the topic of Dharma. He had a great understanding of it. And he was in many ways truly a modern day Rishi. Dharma and modern European thought disagrees on many things in their method of approach as well as conclusions. But they agree in one most important thing, that they are not dogmatic and they do not punish dissent, and both allow for reason and freedom to question and inquire. In India, where this freedom was never under question, we do not even see the importance of the problem. But in the West, this right was won the hard way. There, the church claimed that it had all the knowledge, spiritual as well as secular. It knew who is God and whom he has begotten. It knew when the world began and when it was to end. It knew that the earth was flat and the sun and the moon were set in the firmament to give light upon the earth. There were dogmas, and to question them was dangerous and invited burning at the stake. But here the agreement ends, and both have followed their own characteristic methods of inquiry. One has looked inside, the other outside. One has wanted to know that, by knowing which all this is known. It thought that by knowing oneself, one would know all. The other studied the outside world and thought that in this way man would also know himself. There was also another difference in their method. One method was discursive and analytical, the other concentrative and intuitive. The two also disagree in their conclusions and approach and tempo. One derives the higher from the lower, while the other sees even in the lower the play of the higher. As a result, one derives man from animals, the other derives him from gods and says that man's roots are above, that he is a soul that has come down into an earthly body and has lost the memory of his true home. Similarly, one school is reductionist in approach, while the other allows different levels and multiple dimensions. Sanatana Dharma has found out a transcendental dimension. Modern secular thought denies it altogether. The former takes into account man's spiritual nature and gives it a higher place. The latter treats him mainly as a body, though sometimes grudgingly as a mind too, regarding it as the body's appendage. In conformity with its basic approach, modern thought explains the world mainly in physical terms. The view is not new, and as a school of thought is quite old, and found in all cultures, wherever any philosophical thinking was done. What is new is the intellectual prestige the view has acquired in scientific circles as a result of certain marvelous achievements in the field of technology. By following its quantitative approach, the view has also the support of our senses and empirical mind, and therefore has a universality of its own. In India, too, this school of thought has existed from very ancient days, though it did not belong to the mainstream. The physical view of the universe went along with a physiological and biological view of man, and also supported a particular ethical theory of man's conduct. It said that the highest aim of man is to fulfill his desires, and those desires are mainly of his body. This view holds, to put in the language of the Gita, that the world is without moral basis, without spiritual governance, without gods, and that its motive force is lust and greed. Modern philosophical thought works on these premises and accepts these views of the world, of man, and his ethics. Sanatana Dharma rejects these views. It rejects the view which identifies man with his body alone, or even with his mind. It accepts man's physical and physiological being, but it regards it as only the first definition of man. Beyond this man, the sages found other dimensions which constitute man's deeper being. They therefore also rejected the ethics based on this identification. They denied that the highest aim of man is merely to fulfill the desires of this body, to make it happy and wait upon it. They call it an asuric doctrine. They in fact rejected all such views of the world, man and his conduct, which deny worlds other than the world of the senses and pragmatic mind, which deny the hereafter, which deny sowing and reaping, which deny law of karma and the path of dharma, which deny higher motivation and larger life. India has known its Charvakas and Jabalis, but has found their definition of man, and consequently their ethical thinking too, as inadequate and unacceptable. Sanatana Dharma teaches that materialism and hedonism in their exclusive demands are very unsatisfactory, that cultures based on a purely psychophysical definition of man are neurotic, that they cannot provide the basis of a truly stable society. These cultures lack vision and sympathy. They are violent. Think of all their meat industries and their slaughterhouses and even their laboratories and experiments. See how they kill whole species for food, for entertainment, for commercial profits. Think of all the tears and sighs involved. They must be leaving karmas behind, must be setting up forces of nemesis somewhere. These cultures are also wasteful and self-destructive. Think of their poisoned food, poisoned soil, poisoned waters and air, how they mine away their soul, how they exploit whole continents and peoples, how they use away in a decade nature's assets accumulated over thousands of years to feed the ever-hungry market, the new Moloch god. And behind all this wastefulness and cruelty, one can also see the mindlessness of the whole prevailing system, its forgetfulness of any higher dimension. Think of its sensation-seeking, its entertainments, its education, its health systems based on a narrow definition of man. Sanatana Dharma also rejects the stupendous egocentricity of modern Europe, which regards all human past as primitive, all Asia as outmoded, and believes that it has been the center and secret meaning of all human endeavor, and that man's history by an inner law has been leading up to it, and it has now reached its finale. Time and space of Hindu thinking were vast. It is only recently that modern Europe attained those scales, though it still regards them too physically and has no idea of psychic time and space. However, the old biblical chronology of creation it had inherited from Christianity is still active. It has come by the back door, and it is now applied to the history of civilization, giving it 5,000 or 6,000 years, the same it once gave to creation. This view suits Europe's ego, but Sanatana Dharma rejects it. It believes that man's history is long, and he has seen and known many civilizations which have come and gone and reappeared more than once. It believes in cycles, in patterns, in repetition. It also believes that civilizations had more than one center, and that fortune smiled on different peoples and regions, and they created great civilizations at different times. But in this matter too, the West was moved by its biblical bias. It concentrated its archaeological labors in the Palestinian land and its neighborhood, believed to be the place where the Garden of Eden was and where lived Adam and Eve. In this way, the first site of creation also became the first and foremost site of civilization. Sanatana Dharma is a soul religion. Therefore, it is universal. Wherever there is sincere seeking, it comes into play. Therefore, though it found its most profound and continuous expression in India, it belongs to all whose spiritual quest is sincere. Its truths have been confirmed in every age, but one has to work for them in order to make them one's own. These truths are closed to the sensuous mind, but they are revealed to a sattvika buddhi. They are closed to the foolish, but they are revealed to the pure and the wise. By its very nature, Sanatana Dharma cannot be a religion of a chosen people or a favorite church or ummah. It expresses man's secret seeking for truth. Therefore, it belongs to all seekers. It rejects the approach which divides humanity into believers and infidels or heathens, and regards this division spiritually untenable. Its sympathy is not limited to humanity. Its compassion reaches out to all beings, all creatures. It teaches compassion for all beings on all planes, those who are living and those who have gone and those who are yet to come. Sanatana Dharma believes that a tribal god, belonging to a particular ummah trying to become the god of all through conquest, has no universality. A true universal God is met in the inferiority of one's soul, where what is intimately individual is also truly universal. Similarly, a God who owns and rules the world, but has lost his soul or inwardness, is no true God. Last centuries have been dominated by ideologies, religious as well as secular, which were based on denial and exclusion. They denied truths they did not know. They denied peoples and continents they did not control. They denied their neighbors' gods. They denied and maligned mankind's whole religious past. They dismissed it as age of ignorance. They described their human ancestors as benighted, as is the fashion of modern anthropology, which is nothing but a development of Christian theology. They described their human ancestors as primitive. They saw nothing good in anyone before them or besides them or after them. Modern Europe's social sciences, philosophies and ideologies, its sociology, anthropology, its Darwinism and Marxism, all are merely carrying forward the old bias of its narrow, self-centered Christian theology. They are blackening, with a big brush, man's whole heritage. In fact, the whole of past humanity itself and quite a part of present humanity as well. But now this thinking is facing difficulties. And there is a growing realization among the more perceptive thinkers that this view of mankind and its past is inadequate. Hinduism, which views human history in great time cycles, can help this process of rethinking. Sanatana Dharma teaches that one's world is relative to one's consciousness. The world of a predominantly physical mind is physical. It is dead and inert and lacks inner movement. But there is another mind, which views things differently. Its world is animate, conscious. It's also made up of things, but those things are powers, personalities. They have mana in them. They are internally linked, and one could stand and signify another. However, during the last millennium, the physical mind has been dominant. It has given rise to ideologies which see the world that way, dead, inert, and passive. Under their auspices, we have learned to deny many cultures, continents, and people as animists or as ancestor worshippers. Hinduism rejects this approach. It accepts the worldview of these cultures as valid and believes that something of it is needed by the modern man for his own self-renewal, that man must relearn that worldview of great spiritual faith, and that he needs these ancient views to cure his own deadness and rootlessness. Sanatana Dharma was known in many lands under different names, but at one stage or the other, it came under the attack of monolaterous creeds which lacked internality, but were moved by a fanatic idea. Many countries lost all memory of it, but India has been able to preserve it. India has come to preserve spiritual traditions which many ancient cultures and countries have lost. Today, Hinduism represents not only India but its ancient wisdom of humanity and therefore, in a most vital way, that humanity itself. In Hinduism, many ancient countries can still rediscover their old gods and their old spiritual traditions. And while it reveals their past, it is also a pointer to the future. While linking them up with their roots, it tells them how they can best develop by following their own inner light. No borrowed gods, saviors, and prophets would do. Hindu Dharma is the Dharma by knowing which many ancient religions become known. It is the illuminator, interpreter of many religions in the world, both past and present. It also fulfills man's deeper religious seeking at any point of time. Once, Hindus were rich in crops and flocks. Their baskets and stores were full. Their fields yielded abundantly. They were great organizers, great merchants and entrepreneurs. They were truthful and honest in their dealings. They were noble and generous in character. They were brave and chivalrous. They neither oppressed nor suffered oppression. They were wise and they avoided fault-finding, and only saw and encouraged what was good in others. They worshipped light and followed its lead. They were also versed in many fields of knowledge and sciences. They were masters of many arts and crafts. They knew much. They were great shipbuilders and navigators and explorers. When Hindu Dharma flourished, India was also great and happy and creative. It was the mother of many religions. It was the land of many chants and bhajans and kirtans and night vigils. The land of many philosophies, austerities, tapasyas, reflections. The land of purity and spirituality. The land where gods were sung and invoked under various names. The land of much dhan, dakshina and service. It was the land where the incomparable Mahabharata and the Ramayana were written. Works of awakened souls writing about similar souls, depicting dharma in action, showing human characters shaped in the truths of the spirit and embodying higher powers, showing gods and men in constant interchange, showing them coming down and going back, giving the spiritual history of the nation, which belongs as much to the past as to the future. It was the land where women, the elders and the wise were honored and children cherished. It excelled not only in spiritual sciences and religious, philosophical and ethical domain, but in every field of human endeavor. Its creations in astronomy, mathematics, logic, grammar, linguistics, education, agriculture, music, law, medicine, health and hygiene, tank digging, method of resource conservation, architecture, social and political thought and organization, handicrafts, textile and steel were equally outstanding. But the causes that govern the fall and rise of nations and cultures are difficult to comprehend. Perhaps they have their appointed destiny. A time came when Hinduism also went down. Its very virtues became its weakness. It became too pacific. It neglected its weaponry. It failed to take into account the new rules of warfare its enemies practiced. It neglected to study its neighbor, who were now under a very different ideological orientation. During the last several centuries, it came under the attack, both physical and ideological, of monolatrous creeds. Under this attack, it lost its self-confidence. It became apologetic. A demoralized Hinduism accepted the superiority of the invaders and became their admirer. It accepted their standards, their criterion, their judgment. Hinduism itself became a dirty word, a word of reproach and shame and dishonor. Hindus became a song of others, and even fell down in their own esteem. They lost pride in their heritage, and they became self-alienated. Many of their sons and daughters even learned to deny themselves in various ways. A country cannot be defeated politically unless it is defeated culturally. Our alien rulers knew that they could not conquer India without conquering Hinduism, cultural India's name at its deepest and highest, and the principle of its identity, continuity, and reawakening. Therefore, Hinduism became an object of their special attack. Physical attack was supplemented by ideological attack. They began to interpret for us our history, our religion, our culture, and ourselves. We learned to look at ourselves through their eyes. From them, we picked up views and slogans that served them. During these years, they set for us our intellectual agenda. Under their auspices, we learned to distrust Brahmanism, the pride of our culture. Thus, a whole class of self-alienated people grew up to carry the tradition of the old conquerors. The old order continues under native auspices and has therefore become even more powerful. The long period, created an atmosphere of mental slavery and imitation. It created a class of people, Hindu in their names and by birth, but anti-Hindu in orientation, sympathy, and loyalty. They knew all the bad things and nothing good about Hinduism. Hindu Dharma is now being subverted from within. Anti-Hindu Hindus are very important today. They rule the roost. They write our histories. They define our nation. They control the media, the academics, the politics, the higher administration, and the higher courts. They are now working as clients of those forces who are planning to revive their old imperialism. Once, Hinduism identified and defined India. Now they are busy denying and destroying that identity and definition. During this period, our minds became soft. We became escapists. We wanted to avoid conflict at any cost, even conflict and controversy of ideas, even when this controversy was necessary. We developed an escape route. We called it synthesis. We said, all religions, all scriptures, all prophets preach the same things. It was intellectual surrender, and our enemies saw it that way. They concluded that we are amenable to anything, that we would clutch at any false hope or idea to avoid a struggle, and that we would do nothing to defend ourselves. Therefore, they have become even more aggressive. It also shows that we have lost spiritual discrimination and would entertain any falsehood. This cannot be good for our survival in the long run. People first fall into delusion before they fall into misfortune. During these years, millions of its sons and daughters were enslaved and sold in foreign lands. In the country itself, they were reduced to the status of second-grade citizenship. Under those pressures, invaders were the head and the Hindus were the tail. Under various pressures, many of its sons and daughters were forced to leave their ancestral fold. But in the days when we are free again, we have done nothing to reclaim them. May the Hindu society become decided and strong enough to receive them again. There was a time when boundaries of cultural India extended far beyond its physical borders. But even physical India has been contracting for centuries. We have now got used to thinking of India without Afghanistan, without Punjab and Sindh, and lately without Kashmir too. We've got used to the idea of its enemies planning its dismemberment, subvert it from within and threaten it from outside. We have become used to the idea of a shrinking and shrunken India. May the old concept of Bharatvarsh, with its ancient dimensions, return. Even today, the old iniquity pursues us. India is subjected to large-scale infiltration, organized subversion, planned terror and blasts. Hindus are subjected to systematic proselytizing, political blackmail and electoral manipulation. Hindus have become refugees in their own country, and they remain second-grade citizens. Let Hindus learn to assert themselves, and let the concept of India as a land of the Hindus be restored. Finding Hindus soft, forces traditionally hostile to them have again become active. They are making use of all divisive force and aiding and organizing terroristic organizations. They are mobilizing local fifth columns, anti-Hindu Hindus, castists and opportunists, elements for a war of subversion from within, while they work in perfect safety from abroad. Old forces of bigotry and imperialism are trying to stage a comeback. They use the language of human rights, radicalism and equity to achieve reactionary ends. No doubt, they will be defeated. I offer my obeisance to Hindu Dharma, which has suffered much, overlooked much, excused much, but when necessary, also fought with great valor. I invoke that unconquerable spirit, that Kshatriya Dharma, which knows no defeat, and which, when roused, must prevail. Hinduism once represented a great civilization, but now its revival is being treated as communalism, not only by its enemies, but even by its many self-alienated sons and daughters. Let Hindu Dharma recover its self-confidence, its self-identity, its unique civilizational principle. May it rise again and make its contribution to the world. Its revival and messages are needed by religious humanity for its own self-revival. And with this, we come to the end of episode number 24 of the Indologia Podcast. We started at a certain point and delved very deep into some very important ideas. I hope you have gotten some ideas, some new ideas about Hinduism and Dharma and Indic thoughts from this episode. If you liked it, then please give me a good rating on Apple, on Spotify, on whichever podcast platform you are listening to this on. You should also send me your messages any feedback, critical or appreciative, on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm all over the place. The name is Indologia, Indologia, on all the platforms. You can also join my WhatsApp channel and my Telegram channel. Just search for Indologia. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. The name is the same. Until the next time I see you, Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.